Welcome to the podcast today. Before we get to our guest, I want to take a second and remind everybody that winter is just around the corner. And of course, that means bad weather. So be prepared, take your time when winter strikes, watch the weather, and plan your travel. We've got a great resource for you at the DOT where you can know everything you need to know before you go. And you can do that by checking 511, and you can get the app for your phone, go right to 511.nebraska.gov. It's a great resource. You can always find the most up-to-date road conditions out there. There's cameras. It's fantastic. It's a great resource, so please make the most of it and know before you go. Today, I'm very excited. We have a special guest on the podcast today, and Colonel John Bolduc from the Nebraska State Patrol here in Lincoln. John is new to the state, and it's been great to get to know him. I really enjoy working with him, and I think he's got a great vision for where the State Patrol is headed. And so we talk a little bit about that. You know, the Patrol is such a good partner for us here at the DOT in maintaining safety on our roadways, and that relationship is important as we look towards a vision of zero deaths on our transportation system. It's important that we work together. I think that we each have our own distinct roles, but by working together, we can move towards that goal. I look forward to sharing the conversation with you. I think you'll enjoy it, so let's get to that conversation with John. Well, welcome to the podcast. John, can I call you John?
Absolutely.
Is that what they call you across the street?
No, unfortunately, they always call me Colonel, and I try to correct some folks, but they keep going.
It doesn't stick, right? It doesn't stick.
That's
well,
right.
First, I want to say welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the DOT. Thanks for coming over.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. I can call you Kyle, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
All right.
And I also want to say welcome to Nebraska. You're
Great.
like me, you're sort of new to Nebraska, much newer. Where did you come from? How'd you get here?
That's correct. Well, I've been here a year. This is my 1-year anniversary this week.
Oh, it is. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been great. It's been really fun getting to know people, not only in the organization, but throughout state government and throughout the state, as I've had an opportunity to travel around and meet people, meet different stakeholders, and just stop in and just talk to folks, whether it be in a coffee shop or a restaurant, and introduce myself and find out what's on their minds.
And you're talking about citizens, Nebraskans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what do you hear?
Well, I'm hearing good things. I mean,
Yeah.
Nebraskans, number one, are proud of being Nebraskans. They love living here. Many people go back multiple generations. I love the fact that it's a farming community, it's an agricultural state, but it's not just that. We have some really great cities. I joke with my wife, we banter back and forth. I go to conferences out in Kearney frequently, and I invite her to come with, and she has come with, but she's like, you know, it's a small town. I said, but there's so many cool things in Kearney.
Going on, yeah.
And there's cool things in Lincoln, there's cool things in Scotts Bluff, and you have all the amenities of a major urban area around Omaha and the suburbs there. So this state has a lot going on, and it's really been fun to get to know
Now,
it.
you gave yourself away a minute there. You said, I asked her if she wants to come with. Now, I'm from North Dakota, and so I know that is a Minnesota, North Dakota thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I know that's where you have roots, but you didn't come directly from Minnesota. You came from California.
Right. Before I came here, I was 7.5 years working in San Diego. I was the police chief at the Port of San Diego. That was a great job. I really enjoyed it. We loved living near the beach, and we loved learning how to surf and all that Southern California has to offer. But we knew that at some point we'd probably return to the Midwest. So it was a great period of time in our lives, and really enjoyed kind of the diversity of the job, although there was no diversity of weather like we have here.
Right.
It was 72 and sunny
Every day.
pretty much every
Every
day.
day.
But yes, that was where I came from directly. But prior to that, I was in Minnesota my whole life, police officer up there for 23 and a half years. I served as police chief in 2 smaller cities. Brainerd, you might be familiar with Brainerd.
Yeah.
I was there for 9 years, and I kind of got my start in Mora. That was my first police chief job. But I grew up in Maple Grove, which is down in the Twin Cities, and I was a police officer there for 12 years before I became a police chief.
Well, I have a lot of family in that part of the country. Much like you, I think I'm born and raised in the Midwest, and although I've left the Midwest, it's sort of where I feel at home. And so even when I moved to Nebraska, pretty quickly I felt like I belonged here. The values, the approach that we have in the Midwest, it fits my personality. So it sounds like you're glad to be back.
Absolutely. We always knew that we'd come back somewhere to the Midwest. We have a son in Kansas and a daughter in Minnesota. So this kind of split the difference.
Yeah, perfect.
And people from Minnesota ask me what Nebraska is like. And I say, it's just like Minnesota. Only the winter's a little shorter. The people are the same, very friendly, just down-to-earth people who are just trying to work hard and do the right things. And very similar to my experience living in a few different cities in Minnesota.
Couldn't agree more. You have a similar mission over at the Highway Patrol that we have at the DOT in public safety, and that we're trying to protect the public. And how do you think about your mission? I'm especially interested in how it relates to highway safety.
Absolutely. First, I have to give you a polite correction that we are the State Patrol.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I
Unlike
say?
the Highway Patrol in Kansas, which you might be familiar with.
That's my problem.
Yeah, there is a distinct difference that we are more aligned as a state police agency in that we handle all the investigative services and all aspects of law enforcement. But many states have highway patrols.
Highway patrol. That's how I think of it. Yeah.
Easy distinction. But certainly our folks have a much greater task than just highway safety.
So in Kansas or like in Wyoming, I think they have the highway patrol there.
Correct.
It's more focused just on patrolling the highways as opposed to investigations and those sorts of things.
That's correct. In many of our neighboring states, they have the mission bifurcated. So you'll have highway patrol, pretty focused on highway safety, as the name implies. And then they would have a separate agency that handles criminal investigation, like Department of Criminal Investigations, or in my home state of Minnesota, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. But in other states like Idaho and here and in Pennsylvania, we have more of a state police organization. It just has to do with the functions. So what's in a name? But of course, our troopers will get a little irritated if we're called Highway Patrol.
Oh yeah, that's probably why they don't like me.
We do much more than that. So.
Okay, good. So can we talk about highway safety though?
Absolutely.
Because I know that is part of your mission.
It is a very important part of our mission. I mean, having a safe and secure Nebraska, it has many aspects to it. Clearly, highway safety is one of the most important functions of our job. It looks a little different today than it did perhaps several years ago. We have a lot more coordinated efforts using technology, using social media, and really it's about education and enforcement. Now, the Department of Transportation's role is safe roads, safe highways, safe interstates. How do you make things safer? How do you make transportation more efficient? And that, of course, has to take safety in mind. So you have the engineering component, which is your expertise, and you have road design, you have speed limits, you have rules of the road, and then we handle the enforcement and education side of that. Actually, we both own part of the education part. And we see Department of Transportation as a great partner in that. And we see the benefit of a lot of state and federal grants coming through to help us educate the public on changes, on what are best practices. Because whether you live in Nebraska or whether you're traveling through, we want that experience to be positive and we want it to be safe. And we both have that same goal. So it's really great to partner with Department of Transportation and all of these efforts, because we want to drive down those fatalities that inevitably happen on our roadways. And we can do that, I think, by education, by enforcement. And I'll just get on my bandwagon a little bit. Enforcement means high visibility police presence.
Okay.
One of the most visible things that we do in law enforcement, whether you're state, county, municipal, you are performing traffic stops, you are attending to folks who may be involved in accidents or have a vehicle broken down. When someone drives by that marked squad car, that trooper on the side of the road, the lights are on, it's a highly visible vehicle, people take notice of that and they will adjust their behavior. Oh, I better slow down, or I better at least check my speed. What we have really encouraged our folks to do is be out there, be visible. We aren't necessarily singularly focused on speeding tickets or DUI or seatbelts. We're focused on all of those things, and we're focused on criminal interdiction. A lot of folks who are committing crimes use vehicles to commit crimes, transporting drugs, whether they're involved in human trafficking, whether they're trying to hide out from law enforcement, they may have warrants, they may be a fugitive from another state. So we're really imploring our folks to get out there, be proactive, be diligent in law enforcement. It creates a sense of confidence in the public that there's a highly visible police presence out there. And in so doing, we have seen our felony arrests increase dramatically. We've seen the number of dope loads, we call them, illegal narcotics.
I read about them in the paper. It seems like every week there's another one. So
There are,
is that something that there's been an increased focus?
It has. It really has. Because, and we don't talk about just interdicting drugs. We talk about criminal interdiction. But the side benefit of that is it creates that visible police presence. And of course, we're doing traffic enforcement along the way. And we've actually seen a slight decrease year to date in fatalities over the last couple of years.
Well, you know, I think there's a lot to unpack there. On one side, I totally agree with the visible presence, because that's something we count on you in our work zones. because we want people to slow down and pay attention when they enter a work zone. And one of the ways we know we can get folks to do that is by asking you to post up outside the work zone. And so we've done that. We in fact have an agreement with our organizations where we ask you to do that, and we're very thankful because we do think it helps play a role in keeping our work zone safe.
Absolutely. You know, we have a number of folks who work in and around our roadways. We have our Department of Transportation employees. We have a lot of contractors. We have tow truck operators. They all play an important part in this transportation system, and it's really important that we all keep those folks safe as well. We all see the horror stories of transportation workers who are injured or killed because people aren't paying attention, especially in work zones. So the more we can do to call attention to that and bring visibility to that, the safer it is for all of us. Because we here at the state of Nebraska are all one team. You might have folks who take their marching orders from Kyle at DOT, and some folks who take marching orders from John at State Patrol, but we're all part of one team serving a great state.
I couldn't agree more. And when you were referencing the engineering and the education side of it, I know that's something we focus on. When we look at the data, it's something like 95% of the accidents are human error, which oftentimes is education about putting your phone down and wearing your seatbelt and paying attention. And so we are talking about the education side of it. The other piece that we work so well together on, and it's so important, is the incidents. And that's a broad term, whether it's a crash or weather. These are things where our teams really have to be coordinated and working well together. And I know that's something that we have a long history of doing, but something that we don't take lightly and focus on a lot.
Very true. And I know that both of our departments look very closely at kind of an all hazards approach, because it may be a 29-car pileup like we had last spring, very tragic out west of Lincoln. You know, we have to respond. We have to take care of injured. We have to protect the scene. We have to facilitate the safe movement of vehicles through that scene. So that's a more common one, the vehicle accidents. But we have tornadoes, we have floods, we have winter weather. All of that impedes traffic and adds to the danger. The dangerous weather is a significant input. And we all are trying to do our best to work together to make things better when those inputs happen.
And I know our guys on the front lines, we think of them as first responders in many ways because oftentimes they are the first ones on a scene. Many of our folks take their vehicles home at night so they can respond to incidents quicker and get the traffic control set up. That coordination between our organization and yours to be able to respond quickly to those things and make sure that we can protect the traveling public is so important.
Right. Absolutely. You know, it's a little easier in our more populated areas where we have resources, but we have vast stretches of roadways in very rural areas where that first response might be a local volunteer fire department, might be a local tow truck operator, might be one of the DOT snowplow operators. So we all have to be part of the team that addresses these issues. So we're not always just a mile or so down the road, and so that's where that teamwork is really essential.
In our world in transportation, things are changing fast, and we're always looking out and seeing things like autonomous vehicles and some of those things, and it makes it hard for us to understand and make decisions on when to invest in things. We're trying to be flexible about an uncertain future, and the days of just pouring concrete and asphalt are sort of over. We're still doing that, but we've got to think about so many other things. And I would think that in your world, things are changing too. What do you see as sort of the biggest challenge today, but what are the challenges that are coming down the road for you?
That's a great question. You know, today, the challenges are, as I referred earlier, we have different inputs than we had when I first started as a municipal police officer 32 years ago. Wow, was that long ago? It seems like yesterday. Nobody had cell phones, right? Distracted driving was really not even a thing. Once in a while, you might see somebody eating or drinking coffee or
playing with the radio or something.
Makeup or something. But now, with the advent of technology and the portability of technology, distracted driving is a huge problem. There have been a number of studies that have placed people in real-life scenarios where they have had them looking at their smartphone or trying to make a call or trying to manipulate their handheld device and found their reaction times are as bad as somebody who's intoxicated. So we have that as a big challenge, not only here in our state, but everywhere. The message really isn't sinking in, though. We're still seeing a number of distracted driving crashes, and ironically, it's directed right back to technology. Well, then we fast forward to what does the future hold? Well, if you talk to folks in the technology realm, they're saying, look, we may be having autonomous vehicles in 10 or 5 or 3 years, where you can be distracted all you want. The vehicle is going to drive itself, right? So how do we prepare the infrastructure for that? How do we manage the enforcement of rules, and what do the rules even look like? But thankfully, we have some really bright people who are asking the right questions. Our legislature is really leading the way by opening the door to being a test bed for some of those technologies. And we're ahead of many other states in that respect. So it's really important for us to try to look around the corner. What's going to be the motoring possibilities in 5 or 10 years? And how do we be prepared for that as first responders, as educators, as enforcement officers, as highway engineers? So I think we're in a good place here in Nebraska in that we're asking the right questions. But unfortunately, technology sometimes moves much faster than state government can adapt. So that's our challenge.
Yeah, I mean, who gets in trouble if you pull over and can you even pull over an autonomous vehicle that nobody's driving that's full of contraband?
Well,
how does that set up?
We have some really creative folks on our team who I think we're going to help provide some guidance on that. But, you have to consider all of the Fourth Amendment implications. You have to consider the technology implications. And what happens if our roadways are much more congested, but all the vehicles are talking to one another and therefore moving more efficiently, and now you need to stop one of those vehicles? What does that do to the whole system? Those are the kind of questions that we have to ask, and perhaps that's 20 years down the road, but perhaps it's much sooner.
Depends on who you talk to. It's a matter of computing power in many ways, and as the computers can get more powerful, which is happening faster and faster and faster and faster, they get cheaper, and it's about affordability, and then it's about whether or not the public's going to accept this technology quickly or not, and then all of the other ramifications that come with it. So it's a lot to consider. It's a rat hole that you can go down and never come up if you're not careful, and we have to remind ourselves sometimes, hey, stop, focus on what we can do today, but don't stop looking ahead.
That's correct. We have a duty to provide great service to our citizens today and think about how we can continue to provide great service in the future, notwithstanding all of those possibilities that are out there.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And so one last topic, John, I want to just touch on winter. As they say, winter is coming. We're here in October recording this, and it won't be long before the snow's flying. In fact, I think we had our first snowfall up in District 8 a little bit yesterday. So it's happening. The coordination between our teams, trying to keep roads open, trying to keep motorists safe, trying to keep the information flowing, it takes a lot of coordination, and I know we're working hard to do that.
It does, and thank you, Kyle. I think your team does a great job. What we really need to be mindful of as motorists, and we all drive vehicles, we just need to build in a little more time, be a little more patient, and don't be accustomed to driving the speed that you're normally accustomed to once the snow and the ice starts flying. Because those are inputs that a driver has to keep in mind. A trip to Grand Island might take 90 minutes, but if there's snow on the ground, it might take a little bit longer. So you better build in more like 2 hours and just plan ahead. That's where we're asking for the public's help. And folks who are working hard to keep our roads clear, our snowplow operators, our DOT supervisors, I mean, those guys are near and dear to our hearts. We want them to get their job done as efficiently as possible. But we also need our motoring public to be careful of them. They don't have the same visibility. I mean, that plow is out and there's snow flying all over the place, and they're not going 70, right? They're going much slower, trying to take care of their business. So we need to give those folks a wide berth, and we need to be mindful of what they're there for and let them do their job. What really drives me crazy is on a rare occasion, we see a road rage incident involving a snowplow, or someone's impatient because the snowplow operator is doing their job. If they think about the irony of that, they might do a better job of just being patient.
Well, I couldn't say it better myself. Thank you for the support you and your team provide our folks as they're out there plowing. And I know, despite our best efforts to keep the roads clear, incidents happen in the wintertime. And so that's when our partnership really gets important in terms of being able to protect safety and support people when they're out there.
That's right. And frankly, folks just need to remember, we don't control the weather. We do what we can to clear the roads and get them as passable as soon as we can. It really gets back to patience and understanding the conditions and the circumstances.
Yeah, and we tried to provide information. We've got cameras up all over the state now. You can go online and look for yourself. You don't have to rely on a scroll on the bottom about whether a road's closed or not. You can just go out and see it for yourself. So we're trying to share information. I know your folks help on social media, and we're working to really coordinate our messages so that the public can really get a sense of what's happening out there so they can plan before they make their trip.
That's right. And sometimes the best trip is the one that you don't make. If the forecast is for a lot of snow and is blowing, that makes traveling tough. And sometimes people need to just keep that in mind and not just assume that because they have a certain type of vehicle that they're
fine.
immune
Yeah, it's
from
fine. Yeah.
the weather conditions.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Nebraskans have seen a lot, and so we're used to bad weather, but sometimes I agree, not making the trip is the best choice. John, thank you for coming. Thank you for moving to Nebraska, for serving the people here of our state. We're so glad to have you. And to your team for all the support that you give our folks and the coordination and the teamwork that we see across the agencies. It's nice to be part of the team, and we're sure glad you're here.
Great. Well, thanks, Kyle. Thanks for the invitation. And likewise for our folks at the Department of Transportation. They're spread across this very big state, doing a great job in making sure that our roads are safe for folks to travel across this great state. So we see a great partnership continuing and even getting better, all with the same goal in mind, and that's serving citizens in this great state.
Okay, so that was my conversation with John. Like I said, what a great partner. We're so lucky to have him here in Nebraska leading the State Patrol. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, that relationship that we have with the patrol as we look towards making our highway system as safe as we can is just so important. Looking forward to winter, and that partnership becomes so critical as the snow starts to fly. As always, thanks for listening, and remember, drive safe and buckle up.